Alright, so finally, a video that I'm happy to do, where we're going to talk about the best of the year now after we relatively recently did the worst of the year, which was one of the worst batches that we've had for a while. But what's great about that is now that we can kind of hopefully lift up the spirits of this past year that we just had, typically we do the top 10 and then the honorable mention, but there's like so much good shit and so much great stuff out there that I felt the need to break it up just a little more, just really quickly. And to also kind of answer that question where if you're like watching this and wonder like, oh, where the hell is this thing or where's that thing or whatever. There's just a lot of really good shit. And obviously my opinions don't always completely line up with some things. But I will just say that there's one group that I want to draw attention to that is not only a great group, but like literally in any other year they probably would have made like this top 10 or whatever. So these are those, and it was really painful to not include some of these, but that's just the way it works when you're narrowing it down. And then when you go into the next batch, there's also this area where it's like they didn't quite, like, they weren't the greatness that those ones I just showed you were, or the ones on the actual top 10, but ones that I just feel the need to classify as the really fucking good ones, where it's like they are really good even though they didn't quite reach greatness to me. They were close enough that I still feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge their existence. So those are those. And then the last bit I want to go into before going into the actual thing is there is that kind of unfortunate group that happens a lot, where there'll be movies that are like really beloved and get a lot of acclaim, and there's just some people that just don't quite connect to them, which is what happens to me quite often. It's not necessarily just because they have a claim to live up to, but it's just like they can be extremely well made, and have great performances in them or whatever, and those will be these. And that's really just a case of I can acknowledge what is so great about them and how they did what they were going for so well, but I just didn't feel like that connection or that passion to them the way that some people might have. But I still very much I see what their big deal is what I'm saying, I guess. Alright, so now I have those out of the way. Now we can go into the way we traditionally do this, and where we start with the honorable mention and then do the top 10. So my honorable mention is going to be Shiva Baby, which is a movie by Emma Seligman, who this is her debut, I think, her feature debut. An incredibly impressive debut and a leading performance from Rachel Sennett. And both these people, I feel like, need all the amounts of fame and attention and accolades that they can get just based on this alone. And I hope they both can continue to do work like this, because this is another one of those movies where I don't, like, when I first reviewed it, like, way back early this year, I had talked about that I didn't want to go too much into it. Like, I feel like people need to go into it as blind as possible, and I still feel that way, and I still feel like the movie isn't very, it still feels like it's kind of off the radar, so I'm going to stick with that. And I think it's hanging out on HBO Max at the moment, and it's available physically, of course, if you're still into that. But it's this whole, like, you talk about movies like Uncut Gems or the aforementioned Boiling Point, which almost made this. The way that movies are able to make anxiety cinematic, and this is one of like the crowning achievements of that. And it's like not just that, but the way it's relatable in that sense of being around family members, some of which you see regularly, some of which you hardly ever see at all, some of which you don't even know, and basically having to live up to some sort of expectation, especially when you're reaching a certain age. And the way this movie escalates into what exactly all the problems are that are going, like every single, like, this is just a small setting and a small movie. The movie's only an hour and 17 minutes, 77 minutes, and it crams in like some of those anxiety-inducing stuff that you've probably seen in a movie in a while. At least not something that would result in death, which is really funny since it's set at the sort of after party of a funeral. But it's after party's kind of a light word, but you get what I mean. But Yeah, and the way the way her life, like everything in her life, is coming together for all the wrong reasons and all the wrong ways, and the way this just continues, and the way this, like the filmmaking in itself, whether it be angles or editing or whatever, and I think I said before that it's like you could watch this movie muted and have no idea that it's a comedy. It would look like so stressful and almost like a thriller. And it's just extremely well made. And I hate how kind of under the radar it was. But when it was out, the acclaim for it was like massive, like really, really massive. That's what drew my attention to it. Otherwise, I don't even know if I would have seen this. But it's yeah. So it's like I said, I can highly recommend that. But I also highly recommend going in as blind as possible because the way these things escalate. Is just where the real magic of the movie is, and it'll be extremely and deeply stressful for a very short amount of time. But it'll be once you get to the other side of it, it's definitely a short amount of time that's really well spent. So going on to number 10. Number 10 is a movie that I actually saw so late. I actually didn't get a chance to review it, unfortunately. So this will be kind of me expressing my thoughts on that right now. So number 10 is The Harder They Fall, which is, I knew going in that it was a Western that Netflix was putting out, and it had a really, really big cast, like a really fucking big cast. And that's pretty much all I knew going into it. I wasn't aware of, like, what kind of style it would be or anything like that. Like Jay-Z produced it or something like that. But going into it, it's worth noting the director, he's also the composer and he adapted the script, James Samuel. And this is something where you can tell there's a lot of influence from like a lot of different filmmakers in a lot of different eras as far as westerns go. But and there's even you can see Leone if you want to, or you can see Django might come to mind because there's anachronistic music and stuff like that. But I mean, this movie, despite all those things, and despite how you can see that it's probably heavily influenced, it manages to put together a product that feels so unique to itself, and it's like just even starting with the cast, where you have Jonathan Majors leading it, and Idris Elba is our main villain, and it's essentially a revenge movie, like many westerns are, and it seems very simple on the surface. But as we sort of delve more into the characters, the characters themselves, like it's not just a big cast for the sake of having a big cast. There's some really, really rich character work in here. Not the least of which is thinking about the fact that this is a western, and usually the thing that's going to really draw you into a western is the villain or villains, and our villains here are a gang. Where obviously Idris Elba is our main villain, and his gang consists of a very, very, very evil Regina King and Lakeith Stanfield. And if that in itself doesn't make you want to see this movie, I don't know what will. Uh, but going into that, the way just the whole production, like the way everything looks, like it has the look of this classic western, especially when they're like camping out or whatever. But then you have places like the setting that's Redwood is like the sort of main town here. And there's one particular extended scene that takes place at night in Redwood. And the way this scene looks, where the buildings are like super colorful, and then you've just got like the night sky, like it's an entirely black background. Like the place is so incredibly isolated. It's almost like a place you would see in a dream or something. And like I said, just on a production level, this really stands out in its own way. But like I said, it's that character development too that really helps also, and that it's brought to life with such this magnificent cast. Zazie Beetz and Delroy Lindo are in here. R.J. Seiler has a really great part, and those are our heroes. And it's like seeing these. Even Dion Cole, the comedian, has a really great part in this, where he's like the former partner of Idris Elba, who kind of suffers when Elba comes back to town. And I said it feels so classic, but so modern, but so just its own thing also, and it's really incredible. I knew there's a very early scene. It's when we're introduced to Regina King and Lakeith Stanfield, where they're getting Elba off of a train, and it's like that's really early in the movie, and it was during that scene where I was like, you just get those magical moments when you're watching a movie, and you're about to love it. And it's like you just get that sense early on, I'm going to love this movie. Like, whatever happens now, I'm going to love this movie. And that train scene really did that for this. And then it continued to keep that going throughout it. And I really just love where Jonathan Majors is right now. as far as like really breaking out and now getting big lead roles in something like this, which he completely deserves. So this is, yeah, I was just really really into this and really happy with this, and I honestly I just went into it with like no expectations. Really, I just knew it was a western, and it's like, wow, this is insane. Like I really really love this. So I definitely can't recommend that enough. So number 9 is Spider-Man. Naturally, I don't know how you can do this without that. It's because I almost kind of wasn't even going to put it here because it's like, is it really fair, because you know they've had like 20 years of build up and 20 you've had 20 years to get invested in this story. But I mean, still, we talk about this a lot. It's like the way, I know a lot of people think Marvel has gotten like really generic and really repetitive and stuff like that, and I can get those criticisms. But like when they do stuff like this, and you can really just see the extent of where you can take a cinematic universe, and it's like and just the affection these movies have for the people that love them and the people that watch them, really comes through, and it's like you can see where everybody had like a personal connection to this movie. You could say it's fanboyism, or you could say it's fan service, and it's like we've seen what shitty fan service looks like, and we've seen how desperate it is and how much it falls flat. And I'm sure there'll be people that think this is the same way, but I just, like, everything about this, like, every choice that was made about the production of this movie and the directions that it goes was just completely working, just nonstop. And, like, every 5 minutes or so, it would have you saying, oh my god, that's an amazing idea, or oh my god, that's an amazing way to put this into it, or whatever. Um, and they still, like I said, you can say, you know, the Marvel movies are predictable and repetitive and stuff like that, but I still feel like they really they just continue to surprise with just how incredibly well they can pull off what it is that they're doing, which seems almost too massive to even exist, but yet it works. And even its emotional beats. And sometimes emotional beats that you don't even need that full 20 years to have gotten to. It helps, for sure, but it's, like I said, it would have been very easy. Like, they could have. It might sound like it just, you know, works itself out because of what's going on here, but I mean, there would be a way to bring back all of this stuff, still. All this stuff that people know, and all this stuff that people already loved, and still fail. That could have happened. But it's, like I said, there's just so much care and thought put into these, and the way they come together. And the fact that you have people like Willem Dafoe who will not come into this slacking, and certainly Holland's not going to come into this slacking, and the way that they are just sort of, and like I said, I know this is part of the franchise machine, you could call it, but even the way they're setting up where else we're going to go here is something that really stands out also, which is something else that could just very easily fall flat and be something that we've seen fail so many times before. But somehow they found a way to master. So that's basically like all of the stuff here, and all the, you know, emotional reactions you've heard about are earned. I think so. It's just basically impressive on so many levels. So there's that. Number 8 is going to be the card counter, which I think I warned when I talked about it when I reviewed it, which was, I could see people seeing this as something really underwhelming, and a movie that kind of feels like it's a bit meandering. There's something now where I guess it's popular to hate on this movie because of its portrayal of card counting being inaccurate, which is hilarious because basically the whole purpose is that the movie is not about card counting. Like, the movie is not called Card Counting, it's called The Card Counter. It's literally about this character, and a character that just uses, you know, this whole card counting thing throughout his life that really has nothing to do with the story at all. Like, we see him going through the whole process of card counting at the beginning. By the end, the card playing is not even really on screen. Like, it's not the point at all. This is very much following this character around. One of the most interesting and fascinating characters I've seen for a while, with Oscar Isaac giving a career best performance, and that bar was already high. So, and the way he interacts with these other characters, with Tiffany Haddish or Ty Sheridan or even Willem Dafoe later, and the way we kind of have to piece together for ourselves what exactly is going on here, where this guy comes from, and it's just this. It's like this really fascinating mystery trying to figure out what is going on with this guy exactly, and we see things gradually throughout the movie that give us all the answers eventually, but that whole journey of it basically sitting back and just letting us observe and try to piece this together for ourselves becomes this really, it really shows you just how much it can really, like how long it can go, to just get an audience invested in one singular character. And when you've got a writer and director that's confident, as confident as Paul Schrader, who already has a legendary status, so of course he's confident at this point. And like we were saying before, this like follows First Reformed, and it's like any director that's at the age that Schrader's at now, in his place in the industry that he's at now, probably would have retired after First Reformed, because it's like, I can't beat this. Like, as far as like, you know, late career goes, this is as good as that gets. And then he drops this on us, and a lot of people probably found this underwhelming, but I honestly just couldn't get enough of it, and I just still like the way it reveals itself, and the way the tension starts to unravel also, where it's like the way Isaac plays the character so incredibly quietly, and you get the sense of the terrible places he can go, and we see a little bit of it, but I mean, the way it's like teased for a lot of it, and like not knowing for sure if he's gonna, when or if even he's gonna sort of break back out, because we notice that he's got a really dark place in his mind. We know he's basically got a death wish, and we've got to figure out where that's coming from and how it's going to rear its head again, because even if the movie might seem, you know, uneventful or anticlimactic, at some point we know whatever was in the past is going to rear its head again. That's what the whole storyline of the movie is, but that we set up. And there's even the way the climax is handled, without saying too much. Seems like it would be something that, you know, doesn't show enough or doesn't really reach enough of a point or something, but I mean, I still, even when I know what happens, I'm still sweating bullets during the climatic moment. And it's like, even Tiffany Haddish kind of starts to, more as the movie goes on, sort of find her place here and her strengths here, especially the interaction between her and Isaac. Really, her and Ty Sheridan also, and the way the relationships build throughout this. So yeah, it may not be the movie people are expecting when they go into it, but it's like, if you want great character work, an incredible, off the charts, phenomenal lead performance, and to just see a mystery unravel and tension build really subtly. This is like everything you could really hope for in something like that. Something that's like really downplayed throughout, but extremely powerful and nerve-wracking. It's all in here to me, so that's how I feel about that. Number 7 is Mass. What's really interesting about this is Mass started off, when I was putting this together, as the honorable mention, but then Mass is one of those movies where once it creeps into your mind, it just stays there and lives there, and these 4 people just live in your mind. And what's really interesting about this also is and to show how this movie like has lasting power after reviewing, is after I reviewed it, I was talking specifically about the performances of Martha Plimpton and Ann Dowd, and how I thought that Plimpton gave the explosive performance and Dowd gave the downplayed one. But it's like, the more I think about it now, the more it feels like Dowd was the explosive one and Plimpton was the internal one. And it's like the way they're able to just constantly reach and cycle through all these, not just emotions, but like ways of performance, or like methods of performance, or whatever you want to call it. As all these characters go through all these different emotions. And I just love in general the way it's set up. I almost wish I had gone into it blind, because I love the way it's set up, that it's not really revealed what this meeting is about, like, just full on out in the open, until like half an hour in, or 35 minutes in, or something. And the way it kind of like, they just throw in these little clues of like how long ago this happened, and what exactly happened, and who was affected, and how they were affected. Like a lot of unseen characters, how they were affected by this. And it's, as far as like screenwriting goes, this is something that like probably should be studied. It's one of those cases also where it's this is something that you could so easily see being adapted into a play, yet the way Frank Rains uses the filmmaking to add those tensions also, where it's like I was talking about, where it's whenever a character starts talking and then they say something that's going to trigger a reaction, we're never sure who the camera's going to cut to and what their reaction is going to be.
Whether it's going to be, to blow up, or to be internalized, or to be moved, or to be angry, or to break down in tears. It could be any of these things at any given time. So it's like the way that can build tension in itself, when it's you just got this meeting between parents, that could have very easily just felt like a film play. Like it could have literally been done in one take. Like he could have just set the camera down, and then this could have just played out like a play. But it's like the way he used the editing and the way the camera moves, is perfect, and the way, like, and when they kind of start moving around towards the end, when they start moving away from the table, and you can kind of see like them getting distance from each other and coming back together and all that stuff, and it's like the emotion is speaking in so many different ways than just the dialogue or people physically emoting or something, and it's just this really powerful experience, and it's one of those cases also where it's like just when just when you think it might be reaching an emotional peak or it might be reaching its closing, there's usually just like one more moment, that you weren't expecting, that'll just blindside you. Like after everything that's already happened, when the movie is close to over, you can just still get blindsided. Like when it seems like everything that's needed to be said has been said, and every emotion that's needed to be gotten out has been gotten out. It can still hit you at least one more time, at least. Um, and and obviously, Jason Isaacs gives one of the strongest performances of the year, probably in any category, where he especially captures that whole thing of, especially the way he starts off, where he seems very sort of, he doesn't seem near as outwardly emotional as Plimpton does, but then as this further goes on and we start to see more come out of him so gradually, and it feels so real. Like it literally feels like you can see these four people having, like there's nothing that feels theatrical about this, and it's like even like with all these big performances, Reed Birney almost feels like he's unfortunately going at, more unnoticed than the others. But he also has huge strengths going on here also, and he's another one where it's like he's kind of the one that's interesting because we talk about the people who we're not sure how they're going to react and in what way they're going to react, but it always feels like a lot of those are people reacting off of him. So it's especially interesting when that's turned around and we get those rare moments where we do get like some sort of reaction out of him. Um, and it's always like you're so laser focused on every single one of these people, and how they're acting individually. Because you could break it up and just say, how will this couple react or how will this couple react? But it's all four of them are broken up into their own individual pieces here, and you're not quite sure what's going to come from where. So that, and the way that they were able to talk about what they're talking about, without going too far down certain paths, which some movies have made the problem of doing, and then they're worse off for it. But the way that they're not afraid to bring those things up, but they also have the script is smart enough to kind of go into all the facets of this and not just go down one lane, which, like I said, it would have felt a bit more ranty, I think, which can be really unappealing in movies like this, when they go down that path. So the fact that Grant's just avoided that completely, is like it's really a masterful screenplay, and and once again I think it's another debut, which is crazy.
Number 6 is a movie that I am very passionate about, and that is The Green Knight. And this was a movie that I saw. I didn't realize I was going to see it as soon as I did, because I couldn't believe that our theater in town actually got it, because we never get movies like this. And I am so eternally grateful that I did get to see this in a theater. This movie is so incredibly massive in a way that I almost can't describe. And it's like the production values on this thing are so grand. Like there are so many movies now that want to be as grand as this, but they don't have the commitment. They fall into the effects, and it's like they try to artificially make it super super big, and you can just see right through that kind of thing. This movie is massive in every possible sense. Like every shot of this, interior or exterior, just looks so huge.
and it's like it really takes you back to this place to where it's like when you look at stuff like, I hate to harp on this movie continuously, but fucking Red Notice, how I literally said that Red Notice is not even a movie to me. And how like the whole thing is just on a green screen and they're just doing bullshit in front of a green screen and trying to make it look like they're a bunch of different places. Um, when I say Red Notice is not a movie to me, The Green Knight is a fucking movie to me. It's like just everything is so, and it's the story they're telling also, because it's like it's because obviously I've been stuck in this place for one, as I'm sure many of us have. This just constant existential place, I guess, especially these days. And it's like to see existentialism shown in such a way that is so that you feel every step of Dev Patel's journey throughout this. And it's in that just constant like looming of accepting fate and all that. Like there's a whole lot of stuff going on in here thematically. There's the whole accepting your fate and existentialism. There's also like feeling the need to have a purpose, and not necessarily just a purpose, but there's people that strive for greatness and are willing to go to these lengths for it, and ultimately the price you can pay for attempting to reach that greatness when you're arrogant in the way that he is at the beginning of the story. Um, but I mean, there are some effects in here like the giants and stuff like that. But I mean, everything still feels like on such a massive, massive scale, in a way that we don't typically see. And the commitment to David Lowery as a director, not to mention the cinematographer also. There's these two working together, and then just everything on top of this story that might seem so basic on a surface level. You could literally just say, oh, he goes from point A to point B because of this. But it's the way that you tell a story and the way that you execute it, and whether it be like it might not seem like a performance heavy movie, but I mean Dev Patel's presence here goes such a long way. And whether it be when he's portraying the arrogance, or when he's portraying somebody that's having to embrace a potential death, or somebody that's thrown into these sort of dreamlike scenarios, like when he has to retrieve a skull from a lake, for instance, is this whole sequence in itself that's its own story. And there's a lot of that throughout, like these moments that just feel like they could be their own almost short films in a way, or their short stories, combined into this massive, massive one long thing that all adds up to, like, it's multiple small stories that all add up to one thing and one experience for this character. And it all eventually has one meaning at the end of the day. Is just wild. Like this is one of those movies that I'm just in awe of its mere existence. It's like just from the get go. Also, like when we first meet the Green Knight, and it's just like this. Not to mention Ralph Ineson's godlike voice, but the sound and the way he moves also, and just that he's this immediately intimidating presence. And basically, because of this one scene with the Green Knight at the beginning, that intimidation goes through the rest of the movie. It makes the entire rest of the movie intimidating, because of how powerful this one scene is, and how powerful that one character is, and it can go in some very unexpected directions, and then the whole sort of climatic last what must be like 15 or 20 minutes or something, where we just completely abandon dialogue, and they tell a whole other story in itself. Is Yeah, I don't know how much is saying too much if people still haven't seen this, but I mean, if you haven't, just please do yourself a favor. I know the theater experience seems to have come and gone, especially now that it's on Blu-ray, but and streaming. But I get experience it in any way that you can. Like, do the movie a favor, do the movie the courtesy, and that's yeah, it's really incredible. I love when a movie like this can just come along and make you feel the awe of what the movie's going to accomplish. Because I don't want to get too apocalyptic or anything, but it's like the fact that it does feel like that happens less and less, that it makes movies like The Green Knight all the more special when they actually do come along. So yeah, yes, please seek it out if you haven't. So now that we're in the top five, number five is a movie
that just like just saying its name makes me happy. The whole movie just makes me happy, even despite its some of the tragic moments it has in it. I'm talking about Belfast. And yeah, it just like if you just look at it, Belfast might look like a black and white coming of age movie that's semi autobiographical from the writer director. Sounds like it's just something that's made for Oscars or something like that. But I basically went into it with no, even with the really high acclaim and the Oscar buzz, I basically had no expectations whatsoever when I went into it, which I think did it so many favors. And this movie is just so incredibly. There's this really great balance of joy and tragedy. It's almost feels like it's comparable to Jojo Rabbit in that sense. To where the comedy obviously isn't quite as over the top as Jojo Rabbit, nor is the tragedy of it as tragic. But there's still that balance there that needs to be had. And it's the way that Branagh sort of puts us right there in this time that we, like most of the viewers, would not have experienced. But it feels so potent, even with this whole. It might almost seem, alienating to bringing you into the world that it's black and white. But what I mostly talked about in my review was how this looks visually is so crazy to me. Like I can't even like I every time I talk about it, I end up asking, how did they even make it look like that? Because like not only does it just look like it's black and white, but there's definitely different shades here that are happening to where it never feels like it's 100% in black and white. That might feel like sometimes there's a shade of blue there during a night scene or something. And the way everything just looks really, really crystal clear, like it's almost three-dimensional coming off the screen, even though that's just the way that it looks. And then the way that it uses color throughout the show, it's Branagh's love for movies and plays and performance in general that really come through in this also that make it just feel really magical. Like you can tell this is a movie that was made by somebody that just really loves movies in general, and to actually see that, like to be able to see what we're assuming are the beginnings of that, from the maker of the movie himself through these experiences where he goes with his parents and grandma to see Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and it's this new experience for everybody. The scene where they go see A Christmas Carol, a play, and how that's in color, but it's like it reflects off of the black and white images, and how we get that shot where in the foreground the play's still in color, but in the background you can still see that the audience is black and white. Stuff like that. I'm sure it's basic stuff, but I still look at that and just say, I don't even want to know how they did that. I just want to take that for the magic that it is. And I said, the movies that can make you feel that still also, like we were talking about with The Green Knight, is something that really feels meaningful when you walk away from a movie. And I was so wrapped up in just how visually amazing the movie is. I think when I reviewed it, I didn't even talk about, like, the family dynamic and the performances and stuff like that. Where we have these, like I said, it's in a different era with different people, but it's still like, when you see, Buddy interact with his grandma, you can probably associate yourself, it gives you memories of interacting with your grandparents, or when he's talking to, Kieran Hines multiple times, and how real everything feels, and how this feels like a family you would have known. Like I said, even in the unique thing that was going on in this particular place at this particular time. And then you kind of have the reverse going on with what you typically see in Parents, with Jamie Dornan almost being like the downplayed one, and Katrina Balfe as the mom has to be the one that's like really in control, or comes off like she's the one that's kind of the disciplinarian, which makes Jamie Dornan look like he's kind of getting off light with how he's viewed by the children in his family. But this the way both of those are played off, where Balfe definitely does have that tenderness to her, but also that command. Like the scene where she takes him back to the store to put the laundry detergent back, in like big moments like that. But it's like, so it just makes you like, you can sense the terror that the child must feel, but on the outside perspective, it just makes you really, really admire the character. And the same thing with the way Dornan seems like he just kind of comes in and out. But when he's here, and I was talking about how his presence in this kind of reminds me of Chastain in The Tree of Life, where he doesn't get like big scenes or a lot of like big moments. They're in there, but they're few and far between. But it's really just the presence, where it's like when he's here, you can really feel him, and there's like a certain warmth there. And then when he's gone, you can really feel that he's gone. And that's
all of that is just real strength also, and the Judi Dench stuff is really great too. Like I said, it can really Dench and Hines really like you can really have almost replace your own memories with what you see or the other way around. But yeah, so this just like I said, despite how this movie does have its tragic moments and its scary moments even. It's the joy that's underlying like underneath it, where it does have the feel of like the best coming of age movies, and I just love in general the way this movie makes me feel, which is really great. So that's how I feel about Belfast. Number 4 is Tick Tick Boom. So we were talking before with the Green Knight about how existentialism is just kind of what we do now in this whole thing. But I mean, if you want, and I I'm trying to piece together how much of Tick Tick Boom being this high on this list is how I think the movie really accomplishes what it does well, which it does absolutely. But in another case, there are those movies that just really like we talked with Belfast, how it's like you can kind of see your own grandparents when you look at Kieran Hines and Judi Dench and stuff like that. But then there's movies like Tick Tick Boom where it's like it just literally feels so incredibly personal to you to the point that it's eerie, to the point that a lot of the main character's dialogue is stuff that you have actually said to people in moments of panic, existential panic, or afraid you're never going to succeed at what you can do. Really, the only thing that you can really do, and it's I felt like there are cases where you can maybe feel personally attacked by a movie, but then there's other cases where it's like you feel like a movie understands you in a way that not many do. Like there's a movie that exists that understands you more than anybody in your personal life does. And it's like obviously these are Jonathan Larson's words and these are Jonathan Larson's lyrics and music and all that. But I do also have to mention that it is interesting how it just feels like Lin-Manuel Miranda has me under some kind of spell, and it's like how I was saying that he was seen as like this god long before I had ventured into anything he had made, and now it's like as soon as it started with Hamilton, and then as it just went forward, it's like oh yeah, I just literally love everything he does. But not only that, I feel like really on a personal level, I love what he does. And so the way he adapted this and put it together for the screen. But obviously, we don't want to draw attention to the fact that this is just completely Jonathan Larson's story, which is how Miranda, of course, would want us to see it. And it's whether it be this Garfield performance that is off the charts incredible, and like I said, I've really only seen Jonathan Larson himself through the footage that we see at the end of the movie. But it is my understanding it's like it's almost eerie how accurate the portrayal is. But just the love for that also like not the love and affection just for him but basically everything that he stood for, like the whole thing of have like basically creating because you have to create, and also getting getting these pieces of you out there. It's like how that's really the only way you feel like you can connect to the outside world at all, and to feel like that this is just going to go nowhere and that you're trapped is something that obviously not even necessarily in this field, like in general, like in any sort of area of life, there will be people that feel this way in one way or another, I'm sure. That's the thing too, is like it feels almost universal in how it can connect to people and make them realize these feelings about themselves, and like how it's almost like I said, how you can feel empathetic towards Larson, but it's like it feels like you're getting that in return from the movie. It feels like the movie is being empathetic towards you, the person that also feels this way, which is a really special feeling. And the way that they incorporate the musical numbers into the drama, and how it's like when you imagine a musical, you probably get this certain image in your head of how big musical numbers can be and stuff like that. But the way these feel so theatrical and big, but also grounded in a way that you don't see in a lot of musicals. It feels like, and it's in that way where like they'll bounce back and forth between a song and an actual dramatic moment, both telling the same story at the same time, and it's yeah, just everything about this movie just completely like I said, bursts off the screen not just in a way that's, big and theatrical, but like I said, just sort of hits you right in these familiar places that you know all too well. Um, and I can only imagine that's the way Larson would have wanted it also, to like just feel like he's coming right through and speaking to each and every individual person that is moved by a story like this. And like I said, the fact that Miranda was able to bring that to the screen in a way that can be done now still, and Garfield's performance, of course, just yeah. This, like I said, it's a great movie. I feel like I would think it was a great movie anyway, but it's the personal connection that I feel like really takes it to another level also. And like I said, that's the thing that's not easy to pull off with the potency that it does. Like you can look at any movie and say like, oh, hey, story of my life. But I mean, when you see a movie like this, or at least when I see a movie like this, it's different. Like it's really really deep in here, that I just feel this movie to its core. And like I said, and the fact that that's reciprocated feels so. You feel so seen when a movie like this happens in a way that other movies that you can probably relate to an extent, don't quite reach. So this in general is just a really special movie to me personally, as I'm sure it is to many, many, many other people. So yeah, especially people that where creativity is where their sort of expression is. This movie is a big deal. So it's very therapeutic. So I am very happy that it exists, and I just really want to like to to nobody to nobody who will actually hear this. Just thank anybody and everybody that made this exist, whether it be Jonathan Larson or Miranda or anybody involved in this. I'm just so glad this movie exists. So number 3 is The French Dispatch, which is interesting because I wasn't even sure I liked this movie the first time I saw it. For like the first 20 minutes or so, I felt kind of underwhelmed, and like it was Anderson falling too much into his own traps and stuff like that. But then something magical happened, and at some point, it was somewhere, I want to say it might have been the scene where Tony Revolori becomes Benicio del Toro, which is still early in the movie. And then from then on, it was like the movie just had me immediately. And then it was like, it's just, the production levels aren't the same. We get, you can say all Wes Anderson movies kind of look and feel the same. But I mean, in particular with this one, the way it feels like he's completely, totally leaned into himself. And usually when a director does that, it's kind of bad news. And you feel like they're going to kind of go down the same path and just but it gets like once they become more and more into the things they're known for, you can almost like ironically enough they might lose themselves. But the more Wes Anderson leans into himself, and you would think he's a director especially that would be in danger of the movies losing something the more he leans into his style, but this movie is just so it's almost indescribable the way you watch this and you see like whether it be like the way the sets kind of break away from each other and the way we kind of go from one style of filmmaking to another, or live action to animation, and we're just and it's like comedy to tragedy to the unexpected in general. Whenever he throws crime into his movie, it's like the darkness and the crime aspect of the Grand Budapest Hotel was why I love that movie so much, and how that kind of starts to come in late in the game also. But I think something that really makes Wes Anderson stand out in a way that hopefully doesn't go too overlooked because his production values are so immaculate is that his movies are just so funny, like so gut-bustingly funny. And that's what I think was really drawing me into this, was it's like while I really started to get pulled in by the movie visually and the different characters and all that stuff, the thing that just kept having me come back to it was like every minute or so something so incredibly funny would happen. And it's like the way his movies feel so sophisticated in how they're made and their style, I almost forget to associate them as being comedies when that's what one of their absolute high points is. And it's yeah, and there's a lot of characters. There's like the whole one of the whole things in the advertising was just literally a long ass cast list. But yeah, how some people can come in here and have like really crucial parts, like Del Toro and Adrian Brody, or Chalamet and McDormand, or Jeffrey Wright. Um, and then you can have people that are here for like a split second, like Christoph Waltz or Bob Alvin and Henry Winkler, whoever. They just come and go. Elizabeth Moss, I almost keep forgetting is even in this. She's in it for like 10 seconds, but it's like everybody like still leaves their little marks here throughout it, the big and the small, and with like the whole package coming together, where it's like every single aspect of this movie is at its top form, and it's I still don't know. I still think the Grand Budapest Hotel is my favorite Anderson, but this is probably really close. And that's not to dismiss like Rushmore and Tenenbaums. I guess you could call his classics, but he's really reaching a point here in his career now where it's just like I said, the more he seems to lean into his style, the more it's paying off for him. And I know it didn't work for everybody, but it's just this movie just works on all of its levels, and it's something I can imagine myself watching just over and over and over and over again as the years go on. And I can't wait to get to know it even better, because I'm sure there's still little details I still haven't seen yet, because everything is just so specific and so precise in the way Anderson makes his movies, and they're just the gift that keeps on giving, and that's definitely what this is also. So when we get to these last two, this was really difficult because it's been a while since it was this close between one and two. Like it was really what I ended up having to do was watch them back to back to decide what was one and what was two. And it's how much of a chore that was to watch these two back to back, but yeah. So it's these might as well be a combined one, but because that's a cop out, I did in fact make a choice, and a solidified choice also. Obviously, lists ultimately are kind of arbitrary, and as time goes on, things might change and stuff like that. But since we're talking about right here in this particular moment, this is how this played out. So my number two is The Tragedy of Macbeth, which I have found is a movie. I mean, I just reviewed it, but still is a movie that I find difficult to even talk about in regards to expressing how I feel about it and why I love it so much. Because the first thing that I would want to draw attention to is the production design and stuff like that, where it's like it's a movie that feels huge and tiny at the same time, where everything feels almost epic in proportion. Yet it almost feels, like it's play roots in a way. Or we were talking about how sometimes the sets almost felt almost Dogville-like. But it's the way it's like when you get shots like whenever we see the night sky, whether it be when the Lady Macbeth's letter is burning against it, or when Macbeth says the line. Stars hide your fires, let not light see my black and deep desires. It's like everything feels almost like it's almost like this really dark, sinister pop-up book is what some of the scenes look like, and it's like in the way they like it. Apparently, on Apple, it actually came with like a making of featurette, and it's like that's one of those cases where I feel like that's something I never want to see, because everything I just look at this and I'm just so in awe of how they could have possibly accomplished this that I don't even want to know. And it's like that's just from the appearance alone. But like I was saying before, another reason I have trouble even discussing this movie is that it's just one of those rare instances where my expectations were through the roof. Like my expectations for this could not have been higher, and somehow they were met, and it was everything I could have wanted it to be. Like there could have been at least one aspect of this that was disappointing in some way, but I don't think it's in there, and it's. And because of availability, I've been able to just sort of I just put it on, and just leave it there, and it'll just it's like it's almost like this movie is like some friend in itself that's just always there, and it's like I just keep looking at it, and it's just I can't believe it's real. I can't believe this movie exists. I can't believe that Joel Cohen made a movie of Macbeth that looks in physically looks like a sinister pop-up book, and Macbeth is played by Denzel, and Lady Macbeth is played by Frances McDormand. I have no idea how this movie's real, and if that's not enough, it's putting new actors, obviously actors that have been around forever, like Catherine Hunter, on the stage, but bringing them forth for audiences, like for movie-going audiences, and now she's like one of the names of this whole season. And it's like to imagine first off the idea of one actress playing the witches and the way they handle that visually. And it's like just every single thing about this, like every frame of this movie is some act of cinematic genius. Um, Being a Coen brother, typically you'd say comedic genius. I heard some people said that was a criticism where it didn't quite have that dark comedic touch that you would expect out of like a Coen Brothers movie or something. But those moments kind of come with the play anyway. Like Stephen Root playing the porter. That's the whole porter scene. The whole point is to kind of break the tension, even though there's still something dark in there with his dialogue basically being about how we're essentially at first we're essentially in hell, but then the line this place is too cold for hell, where it could be like either the reality is, oh no, this isn't hell, or it's the case of this place is too cold blooded to even be hell. You could take that either way you want to, but it's because that's the beauty of Shakespeare in itself. But yeah, and when you just think about this as an adaptation, like the way Ross is incorporated to it, like some of the things that Ross does here, like other productions of the past have done, but it's that Alex Hassel performance that really brings it to life also. And like I said, just these little changes here of like making some of the dialogue more conversational, where like some of the monologues that Macbeth would typically say to the audience have now been put into people's being. Sometimes people getting other people's dialogue, like the old man scene, which it still completely blows my mind that that's on there also. How a lot of Ross's dialogue just went to the old man in the scene, and it almost kind of became a monologue instead of a back and forth with the old man kind of in the background. And it's just on all fronts, a production level, performance, adaptation. Everything. The dagger scene, where he sees it as the door handle to Duncan's bedroom, is just every choice made here feels like a perfect one, and it feels like a perfect adaptation. There may be like some cases where like Polanski's version did a certain scene better or something like that, or Wells or whoever. But there's the way this movie feels like its own thing while also being the story we all know, is just remarkable. This whole movie just has a remarkable existence, and I just can't praise it enough. And so to the point that eventually I just lose the words. So I'm kind of surprised I've gotten this far without just losing my mind and saying I can't even describe how this movie makes me feel. But to have your expectations that high met. Is just something that's crazy to me. Like, you think you'd be doing a disservice sometimes when you expect something of a movie this great, but I mean, when it's up to the task. And I think that's the thing also, the reason I was comfortable with having such high expectations for it was it's like, these are people that I really, really trust. Joel Cohen, Denzel, Frances McDormand. Like, it's all... I feel like there was no way this was going to fail. And I'm so glad that it basically exceeded that feeling. As impossible as that might seem, and that's so. Yeah, I'm just like many of the movies on here. I'm just glad this exists. I'm so happy. This is such a strong year for movies that I'm so happy that just exists. And like production wise, we've been really on another level this year, with The Green Knight and The French Dispatch and this Belfast, even everything that's accomplished in Spider-Man. You could say that about. And it's because in Harder They Fall, I feel like this is just a real. I'm really really like, you can say lists are arbitrary and they'll change over time and stuff like that, but I mean, this was a year in particular where once I finished making this list, I felt really good about it, and it's and it's just the height that this year has reached. Are really, and I feel like a lot of the times when I make these, a lot of them are like maybe more like smaller dialogue driven or stuff like that, But like I said, it just feels like we really reached a certain scale with this year and what movies could accomplish on a production level, and I'm just really, really happy with this year. So, with all of that in mind, um, I'm sure if you've been watching the videos on this channel, this won't you probably already know this, and even if you haven't, with everything that's already been said, surely you know what number one is by this point. Of course, it is Dune. A movie that, like I said, I wasn't as on the hype train when it started because I wasn't as into, the new Blade Runner as a lot of people were, but Villeneuve as a director has really shown that he really is on another, like, you see these directors that are kind of, they find a fan base and those fan bases put them on a certain pedestal. And it's like a pedestal that seems like really hard to constantly meet expectations. And some people might say they're like overrated or something like that. But I mean, with each new thing that Villeneuve does, it feels like it takes us to a whole other plane. And it's like just when you think that Blade Runner 2049 would have been the peak of any other sci-fi director's career, that this was like the follow-up, and that we've got still part two to come. This is, and like the whole thing of this being an incomplete movie technically, the fact that it can achieve what it already has, to the point that I have no problems whatsoever saying it's the best of all the incredible, incredible output of this year we've just talked about already. Um, it's, I guess I feel like I've already talked about it now, because it's like you talk about the spectacle that we've seen this year and the effort that was actually put into these productions, and the fact that we still have movies like Red Notice coming out that make you feel like movies are dying and stuff like that, or filmmakers just don't care anymore and Hollywood doesn't care anymore, or whoever's behind all this stuff. And then a movie like Dune happens and you realize you can have a blockbuster that like means something and that isn't just something that's churned out, something that has like all the care in the world put into it, a movie that can, movies that still exist, that can make you feel like you're on another planet that doesn't exist. And it's like, this is the kind of stuff you'd associate with James Cameron, and you're like, James Cameron is like this untouchable name, particularly in sci-fi. But I mean, Villeneuve is basically reaching those heights already, and it feels like he's barely started. It feels like he's barely started his career, and to make something like Dune already is like and what's already happened before it. It's insane. It's brilliant. Like it's, I don't envy him at all for the expectations that his career has from here on out. But like I said, the fact that you can still feel like you're in trustworthy hands with the people that are out there, whether it be actors like Denzel and Francis McDormand, or filmmakers like Denis Villeneuve. And it's, like I said, I just, and that's the thing too, is usually when movies this big reach this height and they've done it this well, they will stop there. But you've still got source material here that has been proven so incredibly hard to adapt. And I feel like we're on the. I've known some people who are book readers that still didn't like this. That thought there were too many changes and too many characters got shortchanged. And you can tell what shortchanged and what didn't make the cut. But I mean, still, when you're just talking about in general, this movie telling that story, and the fact that we still have part two, like there's still the possibility that some stuff that didn't make this, that's already happened in the book by now, could be pushed into a different chronological order in two. And I feel like I'm confident they'll find a way to piece it all together if that's the case, coherently, and to still tell this story, and give this story what it deserves. This really, really cinematic treatment. That's the funny thing too that I was talking about before, about how when I was reviewing it, was how this is a movie that's been said to be almost impossible to adapt, given that we have the miniseries and the Lynch movie, that where some people were saying it's still there's still room for this to have a quintessential adaptation, and that adaptation has not happened yet. And the fact that some people say it might be unfilmable to do a proper adaptation, but it's like the fact that the story is so cinematic, and the fact that it feels like we're finally really getting that in a way that's really shows that, in a way that really expresses what this story is capable of on a screen, a massive screen at that. showing us these massive worlds and telling this, almost sort of Shakespearean story of like, power and betrayals and stuff like that. And all these characters played by all of these amazing actors. Even if some of them get shortchanged, I still feel like people they make their presence known throughout it at least. Even if Brolin and Stephen Henderson didn't quite get as much to work with as they would have if they were more directly adapted from the book, but still, all the characters here still feel so rich, and the performances really bring that to life. That's another thing where it's like, in a movie this big, and especially in sci-fi movies, you might think that the acting might tend to falter, or the acting is like something to not really pay much attention to. But that like every like aspect of this movie reaches its absolute full potential, and the fact that this is led by Timothée Chalamet doing everything he can with this, which because he's got to start in one place and then end up in an entirely different one before this part is even over, and the way that he accomplishes all that, the almost naivete of somebody that's just now getting into this, somebody that's still learning everything, and then somebody that has to be in the position that he's in by the end of this, and to start him off on that path that we eventually know he is going to reach. The way he's playing this so far is pretty much perfect, and his casting is perfect also. I was saying before, he might seem like a lazy casting choice because Hollywood only goes after like 2 or 3 actors of like his and Tom Holland's ages at a time. So it might seem like he was just kind of roped into this for that sake, but no, he's really owning this part, and I can't wait to see what he does going forward also. And Rebecca Ferguson is really helping him out on this also. Really bring in the emotion, but also the authority, but also like this mother that's sort of losing her child to this power as he grows into what his ultimate purpose is. And it's like he's becoming less her child and more this leader, and to watch that through her also is just as effective also. And the people that come in and out, Jason Momoa, Javier Bardem, Oscar Isaac's incredible in this. Stellan Skarsgård is absolutely terrifying, and I love it so much. And it's like even Batista's building up this part that you can't wait to see more of in the sequel. But talking about just this one, like not just talking about it, setting up something else like we were talking about with Spider-Man, but it's like what it accomplishes by itself in this 2.5 hours. Is some of the best stuff that's been in movies, period. Like I said, in all aspects. Whether it be the use of CGI or the use of, practical effects and the idea of building these worlds. And it's just so... Like I said, world building's an easy thing to get lost into, and it'll make you forget about all the other aspects when you're creating. But this movie and this story... does not do that. So I feel very comfortable saying that this was my favorite movie of the year, and all of these were my favorites of the year. I really, really love all of these. So that's I think where I stand on 2021. There's a couple of things that passed by. There's a couple of foreign movies I didn't get around to yet that may or may not have made it here. Like we were saying, eventually, this will change anyway over time. But like I said, I feel really, really good about what's here and my opinions of these, and that this is a very, very solid 10. Plus Shiva Baby in the honorable mention there. So, yeah, so I think that's where I'm going to end this. And I'm assuming 2021, apart from the award season stuff, obviously. But, yeah, so we're going to continue to do all that award stuff, and I'll have some other things coming out here, like Jackass will be happening, and stuff like that, and some new releases, so we'll get to all that stuff. But in the meantime, I think that's it.